Hi guys, this is your girl Wakeji Kamore and welcome to Reflections by Wakeji Kamore. We are continuing with the book of 2 Kings, and today we are going to be covering chapter 4. Again, I would like to remind you to please pause this recording and read the chapter for yourself before you listen to the recording. That way you will get so much more. You'll get so much more insight. You'll be able to understand it for yourself, and you'll be able to just know what it is that we're talking about. This chapter has 3 miracles. It has 3 miracles that Elisha performed. So I'm going to separate this chapter and make it into 3 different parts. The idea is not to run through the book. The idea is not to run through the second book of Kings. The idea is to get as many lessons as possible and to get to know God as much as we can. So this chapter is going to be in 3 different parts. It's going to be in 3 different parts. So anyway, before we start, if you're here for the very first time, please subscribe. Please hit the notification bell so that you don't miss any upcoming record. All right, let me tell you the first part. We are going to be reading, or rather hearing, about Elisha and how he helped a poor widow. This woman had been left by his husband. Rather, the husband had died. He didn't leave her. The husband had died, and she had been left with her 2 sons, and the husband had debt. And the people who he owed had come to this woman and said, "Well, ulipe, ama if not, we're going to take your sons and make them into slaves." So what did she do? She went to Elisha and says, "My husband who served you is dead. And you know how he feared the Lord. But now the creditor has come, threatening to take my 2 sons as slaves." Then Elisha says, "What can I do to help you?" And Elisha asked, "Tell me what you have in the house." And the woman, which is so common for us, said, "I have nothing except a flask of olive oil." We always start by saying we have nothing, and then there's always that small little thing that we think is so small. Actually, it's not usually so small, but we, in our minds and in our perspective, it's very, very small and probably cannot help us. And Elisha has said, "Borrow as many empty jars as you can from your friends and neighbors. Then go into your house with your sons and shut the doors behind you. Pour the olive oil out from the flask into the jars, setting each one aside when it's filled." So she did as she was told, and his son kept bringing in jars to her, and she filled one after the other. Soon every container was full to the brim. "Bring me another jar," she said to one of her sons. There aren't any more," he told her, and the olive oil stopped flowing. When she told the man of God what had happened, he said to her, "Now sell the olive oil and pay your debts, and you and your sons can live on what is left over." There are so many lessons from this chapter, or rather from this small story. And this story is actually from verse 1 to verse 7. This is chapter 4, from verse 1 to verse 7. And these are the lessons that I learned. First, when I'm in trouble, seek godly wisdom to gain a new perspective. Because when you're in trouble and you decide to just be there by yourself, you will not gain a new perspective. Seek either godly wisdom or go to God himself and say, "God, this is how I feel, please help me." And the Holy Spirit will help you. The Holy Spirit will send someone your way who will give you a new perspective. Number 2, use what you have to get what you need. Use what you have to get what you need. Sometimes what we have seems so little to us, but imagine that little thing that you think is little. And I mean, you are like, "But now this, what is this? Like, I'm just gifted in this. I only sing. I only write. I only give stories." That is exactly what you can use to get what it is that you need. And then something else that's so where you want to go. The widow had only 1 small jar of olive oil, and she was instructed to pour it out. Let me tell you what I think, guys. So I'm imagining that this was a small flask of oil. It's like a small chupa. Let's assume like maybe it was like 500 ml of olive oil. Like a chupa kamaji 500 ml. First, if you tell me to pour my 500 ml of olive oil into a mtungi of 20 liters. First, you know that mtungi will just swallow that whole kamafuta. Nothing is going to be left. It's like how I feel when I boil half a liter of milk in a big sufuria. I feel like my milk has imemezwa na hiyo sufuria, like it's not going to attach to the sides of the sufuria, and it's going to be like quarter liter by the time it's boiled. Or by the time I empty it to another container, it's going to be swallowed up. So this must have been hard for her to do. She had, like, let's say 500 ml of oil, and she's being told to pour it out to a bigger container. That means, you know how mafuta attaches to the sides of whatever container. So it was going to be like, if you had to pour it out again, it would definitely be less. So she was almost like losing the oil. And sometimes that's how sowing looks like. Sowing is, sometimes God asks us to sow, and what you're sowing, you feel like you have nothing, and God is asking you to sow that nothing. You're like, but now this is nothing, like it's not enough even for me. And then you're asking me to pour it out, you're asking me to give it out. But that is exactly what this lady did. She actually did what she was asked to. She poured it out. And I like God's mathematics. It's not like 1 + 1 = 2. It is 1 + 1 = 1,000,000. I like it. I like how God's math is. It's so different, and He just multiplies the seed if we just trust Him. I like the fact that God made this woman a chain of distribution of olive oil. And I'm imagining at this specific time, by the time she has only a flask of olive oil, it must have been a commodity that was in so much demand. And God made her a distribution channel of olive oil, the thing that was actually so in demand in the time and the season that she was in. I like the fact that she did not just depend on her own supplies. She wasn't afraid to ask for help. She went and asked her neighbors and her friends to help her with empty jars. I'm like, sometimes we think that we can do everything by ourselves. Imagine we can't. You have to ask for help, and asking for help is not weakness. So do ask for help. I like the fact that she was quickly able to sell the product, which was the olive oil, because she was providing something that everyone needed at that specific time. But my favorite lesson is how committed she was to paying her debt. And she was like, I want to pay this debt. I just don't know how to do it. I'm going to ask for help. Even if she just goes to Elisha and says, Ike, I need help. I need help to pay this debt. And God was like, you have come to the right place. I am going to give you supernatural abundance, supernatural resources, and supernatural provision, not to just pay your debt, but to have even much more to live by. God didn't just pay her debt. She started a whole company for olive oil. She became a distributor of olive oil. Like, my goodness, that woman was set up for life. She was set up for life. You can imagine, which was such a great thing. I pray that God gives us supernatural abundance. I pray that God gives us supernatural resources and supernatural provision in response to our obedience, in response to our commitment to even get out of debt, in response to our commitment to do the right thing, that the Lord will bless us with supernatural abundance, resources, and provision. Thank you so much for listening. This has been your girl, Wakeji Kamore, and this is Reflections by Wakeji Kamore. See you tomorrow.